Today we're cooking duck confit. That's duck legs that are first poached in duck fat and then crisped up. When done right, the meat becomes soft as butter and the skin becomes perfectly crispy. If you read about this dish in the food section of the New York Times, SeriousEats.com, or any other home cooking publication, you would think that the biggest problem facing you with this dish was fat management. Let me assure you that this is nothing like deep frying. Dealing with fat is the easy part of this dish, and I'll give you some tips on that. The hard part is achieving perfectly crispy skin without overcooking the meat. That's the part that usually is briefly mentioned in recipes as an afterthought. Oh yeah, by the way, crisp them up in the skillet or the oven. If you go the skillet route, only part of the skin turns crispy because duck legs are, well, not really flat. If you go the oven route, your house fills with smoke, fire alarms go off, and the buttery soft meat overcooks in parts and turns a bit leathery. But from today on, you no longer need to settle for less than perfect confit, because today I'll show you that you can have your cake and eat it too. Yes, we are going to get not the usual 60%, but 100% of the skin crispy and 100% of the meat deliciously soft. In fact, in the end of this video, I'm going to eat the entire duck leg just for you, to show you that I was not picking out nice Instagrammable bites. This leg has nothing to hide. First, we'll need to choose duck legs. I much prefer the texture of Long Island duck, also known as Peking duck, because they are small and tender and have a perfect ratio of fat to flesh. But if you want to use larger duck, you're welcome to do that. Let's salt and pepper the legs on all sides. Be a little stingy with salt. These legs will cook for a long time, so they'll lose a lot of moisture and their flavor will get very concentrated, and you don't want them to be too salty. Rub all the seasonings in, cover and refrigerate overnight. The next day, preheat the oven to 250 Fahrenheit and dry the legs off really well on paper towels. Okay, the scary topic of duck fat. It doesn't have to be scary if you only cook 4 legs. This way you'll only need 2 cups of duck fat. If you don't have any, you can buy some. It is not very expensive. But since duck fat freezes well and keeps in the freezer forever, I only bought duck fat once in my life, because every time I cooked duck, I ended up with duck fat that I froze for future use. Let's dump 2 cups of duck fat into a pot that will hold the legs very snugly. The cozier they are, the less fat you'll need. Set the pot over medium heat and heat up the fat to about 200 Fahrenheit. Then turn the heat off and put in the legs. I'm using a 3-quart saucepan, and at first it looks hopeless. It seems that there is no way that it will hold 4 legs. But if you weave them together like this, they will fit. It's totally fine if the little bones stick out, and it's even fine if a little bit of meat sticks out, because as the legs cook, they'll produce enough fat to sink themselves. I also like to add some shallots and garlic and thyme, but that's completely optional. It's really not for the benefit of the duck as much as for the benefit of the shallots. Shallots cooked in duck fat are indescribably good, and I'll be able to add them to some lentils or buckwheat or whatever I'll end up serving with my duck legs. Put the pot in the middle of the oven for 2.5 hours. Then start to test for doneness. Thermometer won't work here. Just like in a braise, the question is not what temperature we reached inside, but did the meat stay at that internal temperature long enough for all the collagen to convert to gelatin. My favorite test for doneness is a skewer or chopstick. If it goes through with no resistance, you are done. I don't recommend cooking to the fall of the bone stage. They'll get there as they're resting. But if you're getting the fall apart stage right out of the oven, they'll taste a little dry when you serve them. Long Island legs usually take 2.5 to 3 hours. If you're using larger duck legs, you might need a bigger pot, more duck fat, and a longer cooking time. Now let's cool the duck legs to almost room temperature. This will take a few hours, so it's best to start this dish in the morning. The next step will outrage all the traditionalists. Are you ready for this? We are going to take the legs out of the fat. I know, they must be stored in fat for days before they can be excavated and reheated, but I don't see any point to that step if you are a proud owner of a refrigerator. You see, this method was invented as a preservation technique. Left in the fat in a cellar, the legs could be fine for a month, maybe even longer, with no refrigeration. The duck fat seals them and prevents bacteria from growing. But in the 21st century, that's what the fridge is for. This refrigeration in fat has a pretty serious downside. It preserves the natural shape of the duck leg, which is rounded. And I don't like that. Rounded doesn't make good contact with the skillet and it doesn't brown well. So I'm going to flatten my duck legs. Line a baking sheet with plastic or parchment paper. Remove the duck from fat. Drip as much fat off as possible and place on the baking sheet. First, inspect the skin. If some of it isn't covering the meat properly, gently scooch it over. If you find any tendons sticking out around the drumsticks, gently pinch them off. Now let's inspect the flesh side. If the drumstick is covered with a big flabby chunk of fat, I prefer to discard it. By the time it renders and turns crispy, the flesh will turn to leather. Then gently press on the leg to flatten it out. I prefer to debone the thigh, but that's optional. If you want to debone the thigh, carefully pinch around the bone and wiggle it out. If any bits of meat are left on the bone, just tuck them back inside the thigh. This is also a good opportunity to get rid of little blood vessels. I know these duck legs look like Humpty Dumpty and you think we'll never put them back together again, but all that gelatin is powerful stuff. By the next day, they'll be glued right back together. Cover the legs with plastic and refrigerate overnight or up to 1 week. Now, let's deal with the fat. Ladle it through a fine mesh sieve into a container. Once most of the fat has been moved, it's safe to carefully pour the remainder. Save the shallots and garlic and refrigerate everything overnight. The next day, you'll be able to separate the fat from the juice. Scoop the fat out into another clean container and freeze. And keep the juice in the fridge to add to whatever side dish you serve with your duck legs. When the time comes to serve the duck, set a non-stick skillet over medium heat. Yes, it needs to be non-stick or extremely well-seasoned cast iron or the duck will stick. When the pan is hot, add the legs skin side down and cover. Cook just until the top of the legs feels warm, about 3 minutes. Let's see how they are doing. Good! The top is warm. Don't get your face too close to the skillet because they do splatter. Continue cooking uncovered until the skin is completely crisp, about 3 more minutes. Are you ready for the most gorgeous duck skin? There it is. Cook the flesh side for 30 seconds. Remove from the pan and let rest for 5 minutes. And then you'll be rewarded with the most glorious, crispy and tender duck. Did that sound good or what? Normally when I'm making videos, I'm too busy to take more than a couple of bites, but this was too good not to finish, and I did not have a single bite that was not perfect. Nothing was a little dry, or grizzly, or slimy, or flabby. It was just fabulous. I know I'm going to get questions about alternatives to poaching in fat, so I might as well talk about that. I tried cooking duck at 250 Fahrenheit without the fat, and the results were a lot drier. I know that some food writers say that it works as well as poaching in fat, but I think that's wishful thinking. I haven't tried the sous vide method, but it has worked really well for Daniel Gritzer from SeriousEats.com. I'll link to his recipe below. You can certainly use his sous vide method and then flatten out the duck and finish it the way I do. Here's why I haven't tried it yet. You do need a vacuum sealer since the duck cooks at 155 Fahrenheit, which is pretty high, for 36 hours, which is pretty long, and I don't know if the Ziploc bags will stand up to that. You also might need a lid for your sous vide container unless you want to be getting up in the middle of the night to check the water level. Since all of this requires over $100 of equipment on top of your immersion circulator, I didn't feel it was practical for most people, but if you have all this equipment to pull that off, give it a shot and let me know how it goes. Here are more thought-provoking culinary videos for you to check out, and if you are ever in the Boston area, maybe I'll see you in one of my classes.